Today's guest we have is Shaun Jardine from the UK, my first UK guest, and I'm very, very pleased to have him and very honored that he asked to be on my platform. Shaun is a former solicitor, a non-practicing solicitor, and he's a public speaker, and now his latest credit is being an author, and we're going to talk about his book called Ditch the Billable Hour, talking about value-based pricing in the legal profession. So welcome, Shaun, and I'm happy to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you very much for allowing me on, Lisa, and hello to everybody. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, so the way I got to know Shaun was I literally just seen his post on LinkedIn about his new upcoming book, and I think it was the same day or the day after I got a surprise message, a connection request, and of course I was only too flattered and thrilled that he would reach out to me, and of course fast forward to today and he's on the podcast. So that's how Shaun and I have met virtually, and together we're going to get to know him a bit better in this podcast. So Shaun, you want to give us a bit of background as to your family background, where you come from, and of course what got you into the legal field?
Okay, well, my family background is I'm one of three children. My mother worked for the Police Federation, which is the policemen's union over here in the UK. Mm-hmm. And I got interested in the kind of work that she was doing. She was doing litigation work for policemen. And I went to university. I didn't really know what I wanted to study, so I chose law. I thought that's something that might be of interest. When I turned up at university the first day of term of a 3-year degree, I was told there and then I had to apply for law school in 3 years' time. Did I want to go and be a barrister, in which case I'd have to apply to the Inns of Court, or did I want to be a solicitor, in which case I'd have to apply to one of 3 colleges of law? And the pressure was you have to apply somewhere, because if you don't apply in your first term, in 3 years' time, there won't be a place for you. I don't know about being a barrister and wearing a gown and a wig, or I don't know whether I want to be a solicitor. So I do what I've always done in these kind of situations, and that is I put my hand into my pocket, I pulled out a coin, and I flipped a coin. And it was heads, I'll be a solicitor, and tails, I'll be a barrister. And it turned up heads. So I applied for the College of Law. I went to the College of Law in Guildford in Surrey. And after that, I had to do 2 years as an articled clerk. It was called in those days, a 2-year training contract. And then I had a couple of jobs at various firms. I was always a litigation lawyer, always loved litigation. So that was my speciality. I eventually went on, and at one firm I met a guy who became my business partner, and we set up our own law firm in Oxfordshire, so just outside the city of Oxford, the medieval city of Oxford, which is say 50 miles from London. And we grew the business. We actually were taken over by a larger law firm at one stage, and at that time the firm was then about 50 people. And then I became its CEO, and in the end we grew it to having about, at its largest size, 250 people, and was turning over about £12.5 million. So I worked for that firm for about 25 years, and in 2017 I got the opportunity to go out to America to a conference that was being organized by a pricing guru called Ron Baker. And yes, I went to this conference in Dallas in Texas, and there were about 100 people there, lawyers and professional services people from all over the world. but I was the only Brit. I was the only British person there. And I got to learn about value-based pricing. I was there it was a 4-day conference, met loads of people, lots from Australia, lots from Canada, lots from America. And I thought this is the way to go for, lawyers, insofar as I don't think any lawyer likes filling in a timesheet and living their life in 6-minute units and having to account for their time in that way. I know that clients don't like it. And so when I came back, I was able to, in my firm, run a pilot, put together a pilot group for the litigation team, the wills, trust and probate team, and the collective enfranchisement team, which is leasehold law, residential leasehold law. And we use that as a pilot group. And then we're able to prove that you can run legal teams without time recording, without having to worry about the billable hour. And in doing so, you can have happier lawyers, you can have happier clients, and you can have happier equity partner business owners, because you can actually make more money. So it was a win-win-win for value-based pricing, and that's why I was so keen to do it, and why now, after having written the book, I'm so keen to kind of spread the word of value-based pricing and encourage more people to give it a go.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's an interesting journey. I think not one that is unfamiliar in terms of choosing law because of no reason. I think myself and others that I know are all challenging even students to be intentional and know why you're choosing law and remember why you studied law and all of those things. But I think for some of us it does work out, and in your case it worked out. Just to back up for our non-UK listeners, so a solicitor is the equivalent of an attorney in South Africa, and a barrister is me, which is so. That at that conference, you are, in the thick of, 2 decades under your belt of practicing law. This new idea caught your attention, and of course you came back, from the conference, did the research, and was not afraid to introduce change. And I think the billable hour is such a sacred cow, a golden calf in the legal profession. So maybe just tell me how that yourself in the book, a disruptor. Myself, I call myself a disruptor. Have you always been that way?
Yes, I think so. I've if I've seen something that I thought was wrong, I've always been prepared to stick my head above the parapet and call it out. And even from a young boy at school, I would like that. And sometimes it can get you into trouble. But I remember probably I was about 22 years old, and I'm 62 years old now, so 40 years ago. I went to an event at the Society in Chancery Lane in the gilded palace that is the Law Society. And I was listening to a conference, and I asked the question, and I just said, look, I don't think that the delivery of law is any different to that of ordering a pizza. I said, look, what clients want is they want a product, they want the service, they want it as they've ordered it, and they want it on time, and they want it at a price they can afford. And that's what I asked 40 years ago. Anyway, sitting next to me was a man in a tweed suit who looked at me, and he looked at me, and he had a face like thunder, and he said, "I cannot believe what you are saying about this noble profession, likening it to a pizza delivery service." And my point was, it is just, the mysteries of law, where people think, well, I'm going to become when I was a lot younger, the professions that people were always say you should be a doctor, lawyer, or accountant. Those are the professions, or an engineer, something like that. Well, nowadays there are so many great careers, there are so many challenges and opportunities for young people, that I think lawyers have got to wake up and smell the coffee and say, well, we've got to offer something that excites people, that makes you want to join this profession, that makes you want to think, yes, I can make a difference. But also that means that those running law firms, those in inverted commas, the establishment, have got to look at themselves about how they're running their businesses. And are they running these businesses in a way that is fit for the 21st century? Because in many cases, they're not. And there's a great book, Lisa, that I'd recommend to your listeners. And it's written by a Canadian guy called Mitchell Kowalski, Kowalski. And it's a book called Avoiding Extinction, Reimagining Legal Services for the 21st Century. And Mitch is a lawyer. He is based in Canada, and he wrote a book, and he's also very much into technology. And he wrote a book 12 years ago that was thinking about the technology that was available. If you applied it all in a law firm, throughout the law firm, how could you run a law firm based on using what was now 12 years old tech? So it hasn't got AI in it. Anyway, he wrote this rather pithy novel about a law firm and how it operated. And it actually captured my imagination, because I thought, this is a blueprint for running a law firm. Where if you think about induction, when your first day at a law firm. Well, in this book, this is 12 years ago, don't forget. Induction is dealt with online. It's going to be dealt with before you even turn up, because you can do a lot of it online before you turn up. And so that if you were coming to work for me, Lisa, and as a young lawyer, I'd be saying to you, great, Lisa, you're going to start with me on the 1st of February, but I will send you a lot of the online induction, the stuff that we have to do. If you do that before you arrive, when you do arrive, I'm going to give you an extra 2 days holiday or something like that, because then you get all of this, in inverted commas, grunt work out of the way. And then we can start doing something that is far more interesting. And I got in touch with Mitch after reading the book, and we become friends. And I got him to speak at my old university, and we were giving out copies of his book. I managed to get the event sponsored, so I bought over 100 copies of his book, and we started distributing them to all the students that came along. And but I think, coming back to the profession, what lawyers, those is incumbent upon leaders now in legal profession, whatever country they're in, have got to think, what is going to happen to our business model over the next 5 years? And the answer is a huge amount of change. And they've got to be prepared to embrace that change, because it's going to happen whether we like it or not. But plan for the change, and actually make sure that our businesses, the legal businesses, are ones where young people and young lawyers aspire to want to go to work.
No, I absolutely. And I think, why I even work with the younger generation is because I'd much rather invest energy in provoking them to think as you did when you were 22 years old, rather than, it's very difficult to teach old dogs new tricks, right? So Working with students by itself, working with entry-level professionals, yes, it has its own challenges, but I'd rather inspire, stir the pot, even at university, ask insightful questions of your lecturers, provoke them to give you a little bit more than the minimum, so I'm always doing that. And I think if there's one place that can change in the pricing system, towards a corner of the globe, as a barrister, the older you get, or the more senior you are in the profession, you effectively price yourself out of the market. And I think the whole outcome of value-based pricing should actually be, number one, better mental health for lawyers, and number two, I think, is access to justice. Because number one, it's killing the lawyers. Billable hours are killing lawyers. Number two, you're having the best firms that are ironically not available to assist people who can't afford their services. So as a profession, as the book title even also says, avoiding extinction, our services are going to become needed but redundant at the same time, because number one, we're going to have fewer lawyers doing it, because if the hours are killing them, then they're not going to be around. And number two, you're going to have law firms, but they aren't going to be able to service those that actually need their services. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there is a huge, I think globally, there is a huge unmet need for legal services where people require legal assistance, but they can't afford it. And there was an old saying when I was younger that the law is like Claridge's, and Claridge's is a very posh hotel in London. So if for the benefits of South Africans, we say the law is like the Silo Hotel in Cape Town. Okay, open to everybody, and of course, the Silo Hotel and the Claridge's is open to everybody, but of course not everybody can afford to go there and buy a drink or have dinner, etc., etc. And so there's a huge unmet need for legal services globally. And the question is, how is that going to be met? And I think the answers where this is going to be met going forward is going to be through artificial intelligence and generative AI, where people will be, first of all, looking to their smartphones to see how can I get a solution to a legal problem that I have. Now, I'm sure that your listeners all know that there's a number of cases where it's been widely reported where some lawyers in America have used ChatGPT to create legal arguments that they filed with court, only to discover that the tools they have used have hallucinated and made up the names of cases that didn't exist. Now, and that's very embarrassing for the lawyers concerned, etc., etc. Now, what is interesting about that is, leaving aside the fact they didn't even check their own homework, which of course they should have done, is that the neural networks that power these large language models, the networks are doubling in size and capability every 3.5 months. Now, what that means in 5 years' time is it is going to be 300,000 times better than it is today. So these hallucinations won't happen. We've already had situations in the UK where a artificial intelligent language model has already passed the solicitor's qualifying exam. Higher pass rates than a human. So the technology can be trained to give answers. And after this, Lisa, I'll send you a report that was published. It was commissioned by the Law Society of England and Wales, and it was trying to look into the future, the next 5 years of what's going to happen to law. And what was interesting is that these futurists, these people, very academic people, had all considered what's going to happen to law. And they were saying in 5 years' time, they think that there is going to be less lawyers. A demand is there will be less lawyers. Now, there might be more engineers working with the technology, prompt engineers, things like that. But there might be a lower demand for actually qualified lawyers because a lot of the process will be automated. And on the one of the great legal futurist thinkers for the legal space is a guy called Professor Richard Susskind, and he's written lots of books on the subject. And another one that your listeners may want to look out is one called Tomorrow's Lawyers. He wrote this book, Tomorrow's Lawyers, thinking about what does the profession of young lawyers look like. And the answer is that he wrote this, I think, originally about 5 or 6 years ago. It's in its 3rd edition now. And it is the lawyers of tomorrow are going to have a background and knowledge and capability to use computer science. And that's quite an interesting thing where you think about, well, we want people who are, the lawyers of tomorrow are going to be very computer literate. Now, think about who are running law firms at the moment. They might be candidates who are not so computer literate. I know of one law firm over here in the UK where one of the partners still working is 80 years old and cannot do email. And yet these are the people still running law firms. So you think, well, what do the lawyers of tomorrow look like? Answer, certainly different to what I was 40 years ago when I got into this profession. So it's going to be, it's going to be, and it's going to be changed. But that's not to say it's not going to be exciting, because, I think the tools that will be available at people's disposal, I've seen some of the legal AI systems in operation, and quite frankly, they're mind-blowing. It is really interesting to see what can happen. And it should make law exciting, but it's going to be different. And I think when you think that if it is going to be generative AI that is going to be providing first drafts of legal opinions or coming up with some solutions, and the machines are doing that, the challenge is, okay, well, how do lawyers charge? How do we add value to what we do then? Because that's, at the moment, lots of law firms make a lot of money through having lots of lawyers on a job, time recording, all on the same job and the same file. And that bubble, I think, is going to burst. And that's why we've got to understand, how do we create value and how do we capture value and how do we charge for that? And the answer is not by the 6 minutes it might take us or our smartphone to come up with a solution.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. But the sad part is that, a lot of them will wait until the bubble bursts, which frustrates me, because I think by nature I'm a very proactive person. So if I foresee something, if I can, without sounding too mystical, if I can make a prediction, I'm already planning. Like you have written the book, and the resource is going to be out there very soon. So I think some of them, the bubble is going to burst on them or around them, and they're going to be part of the mess. And I think, there are some that, like you described, I think one of the P's is pioneer in your book. You'll talk about that in a little while. There are going to be those that are going to take on the challenge. And I think, one thing that I like about being a change agent, and that's something that you are, even though you call yourself a disruptor, is that we not only, create controversy. We don't just put out ideas there for the sake of generating, a buzz. But what I like is when we do that and we provide the tool. In terms of the pricing issue, even when we're dealing with using AI extensively in the future in the profession, we have a tool. You've done the research, and now you have the book. And of course, if people join the VBP colony, then they get further learning tools. But I think it's really, people would be remiss if we didn't equip ourselves with the tool, which is the book. Because we don't want to wait. I certainly don't want to be a casualty of the bubble bursting, and then we're wondering where's our money going to come from, and then it's too late to try to introduce anything in a crisis. So maybe it's a nice point for you to just elaborate on the book, and of course the eight points, or the 8 Ps, and just briefly describe how that whole cycle or system will work in a law firm.
I'd be delighted. Well, the 8P point plan, as I call it, is actually based on a model from the Harvard Business School, from a professor there called John Kotter, Kotter. And John Kotter is one of the world's leading authorities on change management. And I was doing a change management project in 2016 when I was CEO. And I came across a book of his called Our Iceberg is Melting. And it was a fable about a group of penguins who were on an iceberg. And one of the penguins discovered the iceberg was going to had a big crack in it. And through freeze thaw, this was eventually the iceberg was going to explode. And the colony, if they didn't find a new home, would drown, or they'd have nowhere to live. Anyway, this book had 8 steps to change in it. And so I read this book, The 8 Steps to Change. And I thought, okay, well, when I write my book, I am going to use exactly the same 8 steps. I rename them slightly. But it is the same 8-step change methodology that is John Kotter has put in his book. So that's another book, if your listeners are interested, called Our Iceberg is Melting. It's by John Kotter and Holger Rathgerber. And it's perfect for lawyers because it takes about an hour and a quarter to read. It's got quite big print, and it's got pictures of penguins in it. And the penguin who gets things done is called Alice. The studious penguin is called Fred. And there's also a penguin in there called No. And this is the penguin that always goes, oh, no, that won't work. Oh, no, you shouldn't do that. And these are characters that you will always find in every law firm anyway. They're the studious ones, the ones who will get things done, and lots of no penguins. So I thought, well, I'll come up with my 8P point plan. I'm going to create 8 sections. And the first section, the first P is paradigm. And it's a paradigm shift. Because if you're going to introduce the billable hour, you're going to have to change a business model. It's a change of a business model. P is for paradigm. The second P is for pioneers. These are your pioneer penguins, the enthusiastic, committed individuals who are prepared to embrace this and try and get stuff done. So P2 is pioneers. The third P is plan. We've got to have a plan. Any change management program has got to have a plan. So number 3 is plan. 4 is we've got to promote the plan. P is for promotion, communication. We've got to let people know what's going on, how this plan is going to be executed, what the vision looks like, where we're going on this journey. So we've got to make sure we promote that. The 5th P is P for permit. And this is where we've got to permit people to challenge the status quo. We've got to permit people to try things. We've got to permit people to be allowed to fail, because with every change management program, and certainly the case with value-based pricing, it is an art, not a science. There's no formula for this. We've got to be able to permit people to attempt things. And lawyers are quite bad about blame culture. And so that can be is one that lawyers have got to get used to. The 6th P is for prizes. And that's where we've got to make sure we have quick wins and celebrate success and do that very publicly, because in any change management program, there'll always be the no penguins who go, oh, no, this isn't working. It's not happening. We haven't heard anything about it for a while. That project must be dead. They're not doing it anymore. So you've got to make sure that we are celebrating success with our prizes. The seventh P is persevere. Any change management project takes a long period of time, and we've got to persevere with this and keep going. And that sometimes is tiring, but we've got to make sure that we do. And then the eighth P is for passion. And that's where we've got to have passion. We've got to want to culture. We've got to want to change the culture. We want to get this stuff done. And so we've got to maintain that level of enthusiasm and passion to change our business model. Now, around that, the book, it runs to 400 pages. So there's quite a lot behind it. But it's what I have tried to do is create a manual. It's a bit of a roadmap. So thinking, how do I do this? I say, well, look, here's a map. It's not an absolute blueprint that you can overlay your firm and your organization. It won't be an absolute blueprint, but it'll give you an idea of where you're going, a bit like a route map. And I've tried to anticipate lots of questions. I've tried to put together lots of learning materials so that people think, okay, I roughly know what I need to do. And then at the very back of the book is a task list, a to-do list. And that actually identifies who should be doing what. Now, that's in the name. The titles are for, mid-sized law firms. So you might have your finance officer, you might have your head of HR, you might have your operations, you might have your compliance person. Now, depending on the size of your firm, that might be just one person doing all those things, depending on the size of the organization. But it's a 126-point task list. And one of the things that drove me to write this book was a report that I read, beautifully crafted, interviewed 8 lawyers from all over Europe about the billable hour. Should the billable hour die? And 6 people said, oh, we hate the billable hour, but it's too hard to change. One, a German, said, I quite like the billable hour. And one was quite non-committal. And that was the end of the white paper. And it was all, majority thought, yeah, we don't like it, but it's too hard to do anything about it. And that was one of my reasons for writing the book. And I thought, well, just because something's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Let's try and map it out. And that's what I a lot of time doing, trying to map it out, create the learning resources around that, and then put it into hopefully what is a logical order, hopefully in a way that people will enjoy reading it. It's not an academic textbook. It's got irreverent cartoons in there. I am challenging lots of other things there about how lawyers work and operate. Challenging existing lawyer thinking. And let me put this out to your listeners, because we lawyers will say we are experts in what we do. We are experts in what we do. And let me challenge people to say, well, look, if all lawyers are so expert in what they do, how come they can't give a price in advance for doing a job? Because electricians can, builders can, those building a boat can. No, they don't all do that on an hourly rate. Build me a super tanker, please. Yeah, well, we'll just bill you per hour. That doesn't happen in the real world. It is only in law, advertising, architecture, and a bit of accountancy sometimes that we're still wedded to an hourly rate. And if we are all such experts, we should know what we're doing, what we have to do, and how much something should cost. And that's what I encourage people to do in this book. And then also, in the same way that when we go to a restaurant or we choose from a menu, a wine list or whatever it may be, we are given options and we're given different price points and a choice. And I encourage lawyers to deliver their services in that way, giving people choice.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing that caught my eye, the book and paradigm, and then the changing the paradigm, and the last one is creating a culture, because I mean that entire, like I said a bit earlier, the whole pricing, billable hour pricing business model is a calf that has a new will our main what the old paradigm is, why it's not working. You've got to sort of troubleshoot all of that and say, the last point is I think that legwork that lawyers don't reference that article interviewing 8 lawyers. I mean, 6 were basically apathetic, It's like, we hate it, it's killing us, but it's so hard to change, so we just leave it. I mean, myself, I would have also been provoked to say, I don't know the first thing about change management, but I know that something has to change, and I think also with mental health being a big topic now, and you mentioned that little case about someone committing suicide, off the roof of the firm because of the billable hour. I mean, it doesn't have to come to that, for us to say, hey, we have a faulty paradigm and we have to do something about it. Like, that would be what would motivate me to want to change something. Like, I don't think the apathy can survive much longer. If it does, I think we're going to end up killing ourselves as lawyers and out of the picture long before AI takes us out of the picture. So I think there really has to be a new culture. There has to be a new culture in the law firm, and of course there are many other golden calves that have to be displaced, such as the hierarchy. In terms of, changing the culture, over the last few years, there've been more what I would call subscription-based model of charging for legal. This is what's going to cost you upfront. I think maybe a book, but what are your thoughts? Legal consultancies, I think that say we will handle your business, or you pay us the same rate for the next 12 months.
Well, the subscription model, as you quite rightly point out, that actually is gaining some traction, and it tends to gain traction with smaller firms and startups, because it's easier to start a subscription model if you're either a newly formed law firm, or alternatively, if you're an existing law firm, you'll create a new brand within that law firm and start offering your services to clients in a different way. And again, whilst on the subject of books, there's a great book called Time's Up, and that's written by Ron Baker and Paul Dunn. And that came out about a year ago. And Ron was the guy that was holding that conference that I went to back in 2017, and he's written how many books has he done? About 8 books, I think. Now he's done on pricing, and his professional services. His original background is an accountant. And what is interesting now, Ron, he runs a radio show called The Soul of Enterprise. And it's a podcast. I'd encourage all your listeners to download it and listen to it. It has some fantastic speakers on there. And he talks a lot about the subscription pricing model, where he interviews doctors in America, where families subscribe to a doctor and they pay a flat fee to the doctor for the whole of the year. And the doctors won't have as many patients as they might have in the normal health service, but they will provide that wraparound care to families that are in a position to pay for that. He talks about how you have subscription model to cars. So Porsche and Cadillac now, you don't own a car, you subscribe to a brand. And what you do is I think it's with Cadillac, you could have, in theory, you could change your car 15 times a year. I'd like to try a different model now, but I carry on paying my monthly subscription. I will never own a car, but I subscribe to the brand. And for as long as I subscribe to the brand, I'm entitled to be provided with a car. And so once you start thinking about, well, how, like subscription models for television programs like Netflix, like our mobile phones, etc., how is that going to work for law? And the answer is, it is happening already. And there's an organization in America called Legal Shield, where people subscribe, they pay so many, $20 a month or whatever it is, to subscribe and have legal protection cover, so that if they need lawyers, if they need legal advice, it is available 24/7 through a network of law firms. Now, that's an umbrella organization that provides services across a number of law firms. But it's not beyond the wit of man to say, well, actually, let's set that up in our own law firm, in our own town, and within our own community, and look to encourage people to subscribe to law. And that way, people do, we can start, because there's certainly, as I mentioned, I was a litigation lawyer. As lawyers, we are kind of reactive. We wait for a problem to happen and then we look to solve it. Well, if people are subscribing to us, we could be more proactive. It's in our interest to avoid problems, where we can help people spot problems might be problems in the way they employ their staff. Let's point out these problems in their employment contracts at the outset, not wait until there's a big problem and then we're involved in litigation and then we're playing catch up. And I liken it to, at the moment, under the current business model, lawyers are ambulance drivers at the bottom of cliffs. We wait at the bottom of cliffs waiting for somebody to fall off and have a problem. Well, what if we're at the top of those cliffs? We're the diligent fence builders. We're creating a safe environment that stop people having problems, and we're there to guide them at that stage, not wait for them to fall off and have a problem. And that's really one of the aims of the subscription model, where you look to have a lifetime relationship or a longer term relationship with a client than you do just on the basis of, oh, you've got a problem or a transaction, come and see me as the lawyer, and then go away again. And I think that would become a better model. It would certainly make for better lawyer relationships with clients. And I'm sure in South Africa, in the same way that most lawyers across the world will do, we talk about wanting to be the trusted legal advisor, and we want to put the client at the center of everything we do. Well, in my book, I point out that we're not the trusted legal advisors. And we put the clients at the center of everything we do. We say we do it, but we don't. And half the reason why we're not trusted and we're not client-centric is the billable hour is against us. Because if you were a client of mine and I want to you've got a problem, I'm going to take instructions on your problem. and I'm going to focus on your problem. I'm not then going to sit there and have a conversation with you about your life and what your goals are and everything else, and you won't want me to, because I'm going to be charging you by the hour for that. Whereas we've dispensed with that, and I get to know you. Get to know what your business aims are. I get to know what your exit strategy from the business is. I get to know about your family, everything that we want to know about someone to become that trusted legal advisor. Then we're getting towards that nirvana of having that relationship that we want. But then to do that, we've got to get rid of this billable hour, because it is against us, because it doesn't provoke us taking the time to get to know the people we want to serve.
Okay, here we go. So, Shaun, in your last answer to my previous question, you mentioned that you were a litigation lawyer, and of course now you've retired and you're now doing speaking engagements and presentations and consulting. I think for my listeners, they would be interested in how you navigated the change, because being a trial lawyer is something that most young lawyers are either very afraid of, or they want to do it with all their heart, and it's the part that's glamorized about legal practice. So how did you make the change from being a litigation lawyer to what you're doing now?
But there was a step in between, really, and that was, I was, as a litigation lawyer, I ran a litigation team, and it was quite a big team. Then I got elected to my firm's management board and became the chief executive. So I gave up my fee-earning practice then, and for the best part of nearly 5 years was the CEO of the law firm. So then you're more about working on the business from a strategic point of view, as opposed to doing the litigation. For me to then move into consulting was quite a natural progression, really. I sit on the boards of a couple of law firms. I help develop strategy for law firms. I will go to partners away weekends and help facilitate meetings. They're just different lawyers than the ones that I was working with a number of years ago. I get brought in for specific projects, which is great. In terms of young lawyers and thinking about your audience, the one piece of advice I will give them, which is the piece of advice that was given to me the very first time I did my first trial. And that was, you will never prepare as much for as any trial other than as you do for your first trial, because you will stay awake at night anguishing over every possible point, and you will be so well prepared that ultimately, if you just trust what you've done and trust your preparation, ultimately you should be absolutely fine. And I remember my old boss telling me that, and I won my first trial, and where I was doing advocacy, and that was great. But over here we have solicitors and we have barristers. The barristers do lots more advocacy than solicitors will do. And when I was running my own litigation team, my litigation practice, I wasn't doing an awful lot of advocacy. The older and more experienced I got, what I did morph into was commercial mediation. And as a commercial mediator, then the fact that you're old and grey-haired and got experience does actually, I think, help. because I could help move people together if they were not clients of mine. The mediator is completely independent of the clients.
Yeah.
But that is something, and I still do mediation work even now.
Okay, all right. So there were some stepping stones that actually prepared you, in a sense, for what you're doing now. Yeah. So I mean, that's a valid point. That it does seem daunting when you first start litigation, but as you know, the ins and outs of the system that you're working in, and what to expect at court, and of course, knowing your case inside out, that ultimately removes a lot of the stress or too much of preparation. So I think that's a useful tip there going forward. And just I often refer to in my LinkedIn post, I refer to having another career after law, right? And you mentioned mediation, and that you still do it now, and of course now you're an author, and you've been speaking, consulting. I refer to that as being an after law career, in air quotes. I think a lot of law students, even entry-level professionals, would probably just say, I'm going to be a lawyer until I die, and that's not a bad thing. But I sometimes, tout the idea that it's possible to have a timeline, for how long you're going to be a lawyer, and then, plan something else, plan something either, practicing, sort of in a low-key fashion, or doing something, with less stress, or doing something that's related to law but not full-on practice. So I would call what you're doing now, as an after law career. I think I'm doing that as well. What's your thoughts on setting a timeline for being in active practice, and then having something else after that?
Well, I think what over here they get described as having portfolio careers, where you'll think about doing a number of jobs in your working life. And I know that lots of people will enjoy working in the law. Others will actually think, I enjoy working in the law, but I want to do something else part-time as well. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading something recently, I think it was from the American Bar Association, about in the States how many young lawyers actually have their own side hustles going. Yeah. And lawyers have now got to get over the fact that, while I'm a lawyer and I'm working for you, I'll do law, but actually I might have another business going on the side, and I'm going to devote, time to that as well. So it's not, law doesn't become the be all and the end all. I think, it really does depend on the individual, and whether they, day in, day out, what they do, they enjoy what they're doing. And that, that's perfectly great if you do. I was lucky insofar as, I was able to do litigation. I did that for, many years. I really enjoyed the new career of being a CEO and then a full-time manager of people and strategy, etc., etc. I really enjoyed that. I equally enjoy now not being in private practice running a law firm. I love being a consultant, going out to other law firms and helping them develop. I thoroughly enjoy educating lawyers about the billable hour and getting them off the billable hour. And I love being a mediator, because when you have people that are engaged in litigation and they, for whatever reason, decide to appoint me as a mediator, sometimes the court will say you ought to go to mediation. Sometimes it might be their solicitor say you should go to mediation. Sometimes it might be a friend say you don't want to get involved in litigation, go to mediation. However they end up, it's when I ask them, what do you want out of today, which is the standard mediator's opening question, the answer is always, I want this to be over. Nobody enjoys, the parties to litigation very rarely enjoy litigating. And actually, when you can help people bring an action to an end, and you see that they are absolutely so relieved that the litigation is over, the cost, the stress, everything else about that, I think that can be very rewarding in itself. And I do all kinds of matters, including, which is unusual for some mediators, I very much enjoy doing neighbour disputes and boundary disputes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, you're running multiple, multiple, as we call them here, side hustles. Yeah. You're doing multiple. You've got tentacles in different areas, and I think it's important for career planning. That you say, what else can I do with my skill set as a lawyer? And I think, like you mentioned, some of what you've learned in practice, are useful now. And what law students tend to think, or law graduates, at least in South Africa, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but they tend to limit themselves, for example, to legal work. So if they have experience, they will in the legal field, they will look for legal jobs, and I often tell them, there are transferable skills from having had a legal career, or wherever you're coming from. Some of them enter the profession late in life, or they've worked in another industry or another profession, and they become trainee solicitors or pupil barristers, in late in life, and they'll say, I'm a new person in the field. And my answer to that is yes, you have to start from the bottom, you have to learn, but at the same time there are lots of transferable skills that you brought, especially soft skills, which is so needed for lawyers, that in my opinion they lack a lot on the soft skill side. So it just opens up the career field in terms of taking an inventory of what skills have I what soft skills, hard skills have I acquired as a lawyer in practice, and then if you want to move into something else related, or even a completely different field to law, after being in the law field, you want to move elsewhere, you can say, I do have something to offer. So I think that's a good point that you touched on, that stepping stones, and also you had skill sets that you had a skill set that you were able to transfer, and now it's helping you as a CEO, as a consultant, as an educator, and of course that's also a great full circle moment, because it's you're now equipping, as opposed to dealing with you're now equipping within the profession, as opposed to dealing with clients and sort of people that will walk in and walk out. So I for one will endorse something like that. I definitely think writing a book is in my near future, for the simple sake of resourcing colleagues and those that want to come in. So I think now would be a great time, Shaun, to plug the book and the colony, and just tell us where we can find the book and when it's going to be launched, etc.
Okay, well, the book is available on Amazon now. It's available at the moment in Australia, Canada, America, and the UK. I'm not sure when it gets to South Africa. I'm actually coming out to South Africa in February, and I'm due to do some speaking dates in the Western Cape while I'm there. But it's a book that is called Ditch the Billable Hour, Implementing Value-Based Pricing in the Law Firm. It seems to be quite well received. It had a very nice review from a legal technology futurist called Mitch Kalowski of that I may have mentioned earlier in this interview, he liked the book, which I'm very pleased about because I hold Mitch in the highest regard. And I genuinely believe that generative AI is going to be the final nail in the coffin of the billable hour, because our tech is going to do things quicker for us. And if we keep charging only for this speed that the tech does the work, we're going to be poorer. And we can't be poorer because we've got overheads, we've got salaries, etc. And we don't need clients to pay just for the few minutes it takes computers to do things. We've got to think about the value that we as lawyers bring to a transaction. So it's trying to encourage lawyers to think differently about the value, think differently about how we can make offerings to clients in terms of price, service level, etc., and capture some of that value and not leave it on the table. But it's an exciting time to be a lawyer, I think, in terms of technology and things like that. But we've also got to understand that law firms are businesses, and they're businesses that need to turn a profit. Otherwise, they're not going to be in existence. And that people need law more than ever, and there is a very large unmet need for legal services across the whole world. So people will need legal representation and lawyers to help them, and AI will enable that.
Yes, no, that's great. And tell, I think for our younger listeners, I think that's where the VBP colony comes in, where we can take advantage of resources, learning resources.
Yes, the value-based pricing colony, VBP colony, you can access that. The easiest way to access it is via my website, bigyellowpenguin.co.uk. There's a tab on my website where you can click on the tab, and then you get asked 3 or 4 questions, and then you can enter into the colony. And there you'll see details of the what I call the 8P point plan, lots of materials, lots of YouTube clips, links to blogs, links to articles, links to podcasts. We launched the colony officially on Monday, and as of approximately 10 minutes ago, so this was after 4 days, we've ended up with just under 100 people in there already. And so that's within the first week. And there's some fantastic people in there. We've got lots of speaking events planned that people can join, and those are going to be free. So if people are interested in hearing about developments in legal practice management, or developments in HR, or developments in pricing, these are all events that people can join, but if you're a member of the colony. So come on in, the water's lovely. I hope to see many people from there.
Oh, it sounds exciting. I mean, I've never, I think I've never really explored this side of legal practice, because I never actually dealt with a billable hour. We had a very unorthodox pricing system in the law firm that I worked in, but I'm very, very keen to learn. And I think it's great that there's the colony and all of the supplementary resources. So even those of us that are fairly new to it, we can get on board and join the movement again to ditch this thing called the billable hour. It had its long outstayed its welcome, and I think it'll go a long way to ditching it will go a long way to improving the mental health as well of a lot of lawyers. So, thank you, Shaun, for being on the episode. Yes, you want to say anything further?
No, sorry, I interrupted you there. Do you want to do that bit again, because you can edit it? Thank you, and I won't interrupt you, Lisa. Sorry.
No, I just, it'll probably be fodder for another episode, but I think, you might be contributing to even, improving the mental health of future lawyers by actually ditching this very, very, ugly critter that has destroyed many a lawyer's mental health. So I think we can also come at it from that angle, and I'd be happy to discuss even on that note. So I'm happy to have had you, Shaun. It was an absolute delight, and I think honor for you having reached out and to be on my platform, which is fairly new, and hopefully we'll have more discussions, because I do feel there's a lot to unpack, and if my podcast can be part, a proponent or an advocate of the movement to ditch the billable hour, then that's what we're going to be here for. Shaun, where can our listeners, where are you most active? So where are you most responsive? I know you're on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Any other media on which you are active?
Yeah, but LinkedIn is my social media of choice, so that's the best place to get me. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Follow the Big Yellow Penguin. I do quite a lot on LinkedIn, but I'll also be doing quite a lot in the colony, and you're all welcome to join me and lots of other people there. Thank you.
Yeah, so listeners, be sure to connect with Shaun. It's ShaunJardine, Shaun Jardine on LinkedIn, and also visit his website, bigyellowpenguin.co.uk. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and of course, buy the book, right? The billable hour affects all of us, and it's something that we want to gradually get rid of. And I think Shaun's book will start the revolution, and we want to be part of that revolution. So thank you so much, Shaun. I'm glad to have had you, and I'm looking forward to having you on further episodes.
Lisa, thank you very much. I really enjoyed chatting to you, and thank you to all your listeners as well for giving up your time.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Hooray, well done, you.
I had to wing it.
Well,
I'm quite shocked with myself.
Yeah, I came across a lovely lady yesterday called oh gosh, the name's gone out of my head. Ellen. I will introduce her. Sorry, Ellen. It's called. She's a lawyer.
Yeah.
She's a care lawyer, and now she's just started an HR consultancy dealing with culture of law firms, because, as you know, the law firm in the culture of many law firms is quite toxic. And she's absolutely fascinating speaker, very, very nice lady. And she talks about, I don't know if you're into football, but Liverpool Football Club is the manager of Liverpool Football Club is a man called Jurgen Klopp.
Yes.
And she talks about she's an avid football fan. She's a season ticket holder at Liverpool, been going since she's 6 years old. And she talks about the legal lessons that Jurgen Klopp can bring to the business. She's lovely. Her name is Gemma Ellison, Ellison.
Okay.
And I'll happily introduce you via email, but she'd make a great guest on a future podcast.
Sure. And that the other, I think it was Dana.
Yes, Dana Dennis. Did I do that link or not? I can't remember. Did I introduce you?
You sent me her newsletter on email.
Yes, Dana's amazing woman. She is doing. If you have a look at her website. She has done so much for women in the legal profession over here.
Okay.
She would be a great one for you to get if you could.
Sure. Okay.
And the other one would be who you could approach. I don't know her personally, but she does a lot. Is the former president of the Law Society of England and Wales. And her name is on a LinkedIn profile. It's Stephanie, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Boyce, Boyce.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen that profile.
Yeah, and she's a pretty formidable woman as well.
Okay, cool. I'll look into that.
Okay.
Okay. Now I hope you have a good rest after. You and the penguin can have a good rest.
Well, we will. And thank you so much, Lisa. I really enjoyed this, and I hope one day our paths cross. And I'm good. Is it Durban you're in?
Yes, Durban. Yeah.
Well, I've never been out that far yet. I've only got as far as Port Elizabeth. That's about as far over as I've got. But
okay.
Yeah, one day I hope our paths cross, and I'll buy a nice glass of wine or something.
Sure. Now I will try and connect when you're here, maybe at least via Zoom or something when you're in Cape Town.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be happy to check in and track you. And
I will. Please do.
Yeah, I was actually pleased to see that in the the introduction to your book that South Africa is one of your locations. So happy to make that personal connection with somebody who's making global waves. So I'm happy that you have a foothold here.
Yeah, I'm hoping to do well. I've got 4 dates for seminars about the billable hour, so it's going to more be an informal Q&A. And I'm speaking to one firm in Cape Town about the actually doing a day for all of their staff. So it'd be interesting to see if that comes off. And I did last year. I spoke at the Cape. Was it the Winelands Cape or the Cape Winelands Attorneys Association? It was the first get together they'd had after COVID, and I spoke at they kind of got all the young lawyers together, and that was quite nice. And I think when I think about that as an event, it was quite interesting because it seemed as though the way that younger lawyers interact with their older lawyers, their bosses, whatever, who were there, it just seemed it was probably like 20 years ago in the UK. I think the UK had moved on a bit, just in terms of, it was very odd for me to hear a young lawyer, a female young lawyer, calling her boss Mr. So-and-so all the time. I thought, well, I've never had anybody call me Mr. I've never asked a member of staff to address me as Mr. So-and-so. And that I was eavesdropping on conversations, and it was all the time. It seemed as though it was as a junior lawyer, you have to be very deferential to the older lawyers. It just struck me as a little bit odd. We're not there with that.
Yeah, I never worked in that scenario, but at least when I was doing my pupillage, it was, for us, we had to call them by surname. So, that was the tradition at the bar that I did my pupillage at. But it is that way from what I know generally.
Right.
There's a lot of deference, and as a result, what I deal with day in and day out is abuse. So it's because of that enforced hierarchy that you have a lot of, people, the interns just sort of suck it up because it's Mr. So-and-so or it's X firm, they just sort of put up with it. But, obviously that's not okay. But it's very much like, it's almost like they're still in school.
Yeah. Oh, well, keep fighting the good fight, because we've got to, we need to keep young talent coming through.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It is so important.
Yeah. So I'll leave you to it. Okay
then, Lisa. Lovely talking to you. We'll keep in touch via email and stuff, I'm sure.
Of course. It's not the last conversation at all.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.